3 seasons. The same plant. The same result every single time. Watching something I'd invested months of genuine care into collapse before I ever tasted a single fruit. I stood in my garden on that 3rd September morning and felt something I can only describe as grief. Not frustration, but grief. I'll come back to that one at the end, because it deserves the full story. But here's what I need you to understand before we get into this list. Not one of these varieties is a bad tomato. Every single one of them has a devoted following, a sterling reputation, and a seed catalog description that makes serious gardeners reach for their wallets without hesitation. That reputation is exactly the problem. These are the varieties that attract people who know what they're doing, and that's precisely why the failures sting so much. 9 varieties. The specific reason each one burned me, and what to do instead. And if you've been growing tomatoes long enough to take your seed choices seriously, this list is for you. These aren't beginner mistakes. They're the mistakes that happen when you trust a great reputation and stop asking hard questions. Starting where the regret is lightest but the relatability is highest, yellow pear. This is number 1 on the list. It's an heirloom from Europe documented since the 1800s, producing those cheerful little 1 to 2 ounce pear-shaped fruits in a shade of yellow that looks like bottled sunshine. The catalogs talk about prolific production and sweet flavor, and they're not wrong on either count. That's the seduction. You see those clusters and you think, abundance. Here's where it unravels. Yellow pear has some of the thinnest skin of any tomato you'll grow, and the moment conditions swing, a dry week followed by a good soaking, or that stretch of high humidity in August, those skins split. Not occasionally, systematically. And the real problem isn't just the skins. It's what this variety does to your garden. These plants spread 6 to 8 feet. They sprawl in every direction with what I can only call unhinged enthusiasm. You cannot water a plant that size consistently. You simply cannot. One end gets what it needs, the other end is playing catch-up, and by the time the fruits start ripening at 70 to 80 days, you're watching a cracking disaster unfold across a plant you can barely keep your arms around. The fix is specific. If you want that yellow cherry sweetness, look for a compact yellow cherry variety with documented crack resistance. If you can't give yellow pear up, the only approach that helps is drip irrigation directly at the root zone and aggressive mulching to prevent soil moisture swings. What doesn't work is trying to hand water a plant that's taken over half your bed. I learned that one the hard way. Have you grown yellow pear? Drop a comment. I'd genuinely like to know if the cracking hit you the same way it hit me, or if you found a way around it. Number 2. Big Boy. And I want to be honest about why this one made the list, because the failure here is more personal than most. Big Boy was introduced by Burpee Seeds in 1949, one of the very first F1 hybrids developed for home gardeners. Deep red, globe-shaped beefsteak fruits, supposed to hit somewhere in the 10 to 16 ounce range. It's on this list because the name carries enormous nostalgia, and nostalgia is a terrible basis for a seed purchase. The catalog says 1 pound fruits. What most gardeners actually get, especially in short-season climates or anything less than optimal conditions, is 8 to 12 ounces average. The name creates expectations the plant routinely cannot meet, but the size thing is almost forgivable. What isn't forgivable is that this widely promoted modern hybrid carries no resistance to verticillium wilt or fusarium wilt. When you pick up a hybrid in 2024, you assume it comes with disease protection. Big Boy was designed before disease resistance was a standard expectation, and it's never been updated to match what modern gardeners need. Then there's the flavor, described generously as generic. If your memory of Big Boy is from childhood, I'd gently suggest the tomato has not improved with time. The memory is probably better than the reality. What to grow instead? Look for a modern beefsteak hybrid with genuine VFN resistance labeling on the packet. Varieties that carry that designation will do what Big Boy promises without the vulnerability. The disease resistance alone is worth the switch. Something is coming up next that will be very familiar to anyone who's been seduced by a gourmet reputation. And the disappointment hits differently when you've paid premium prices for premium seed. Green Zebra. Developed in 1983 by Tom Wagner of Everett, Washington, introduced to the world through a small seed catalog that found its way into the hands of chefs and serious gardeners alike. The fruit is genuinely striking, 3 to 4 ounces, olive green with dark green stripes ripening to amber yellow with deeper green stripes. It looks like it belongs on a restaurant plate. That's the seduction entirely, and I fell for it completely. Here's the truth about green zebra. The variety isn't the problem. The framing around it is. The gourmet reputation, the chef endorsements, the catalog language about complex flavor. All of it creates an expectation of richness and sweetness that this tomato was never designed to meet. Green zebra is genuinely tart, genuinely acidic, described accurately as zingy. If that's what you want, it delivers. But most gardeners planting it for the first time expect sweetness with complexity, and what they get is something much closer to a sharp, assertive acidity that polarizes everyone at the table. And then there's the ripeness problem, which compounds everything. You cannot read green zebra the way you read a red tomato. You're feeling for softness, watching for subtle color shifts in a fruit that looks green when unripe and green when ripe. Harvest too early and it's bitter. Wait too long and the texture turns mealy, particularly in cooler conditions, which is exactly when the flavor also disappoints most. If the tart profile is actually what you're after, grow it with intention. Harvest when it yields to gentle pressure, and the stripes have shifted from olive to amber. But if you wanted complexity with sweetness, look for a truly rich heirloom bred for that flavor profile. Green zebra didn't lie to you. The catalog description did. If this kind of specific hard-won information is useful to you, consider subscribing. This is exactly the kind of thing I wish I'd had before I wasted a season figuring it out myself. Mortgage lifter. The origin story alone could sell seeds for a century. Developed in West Virginia in the 1930s and 40s by a man known as Radiator Charlie Biles, who hand-pollinated 4 large-fruited varieties over multiple seasons until he'd created something worth selling. He sold plants for $1 each, paid off his mortgage in 6 years, and gave the tomato a name that passes through the gardening community like folklore. I planted it because the story is irresistible. The fruit runs 1 to 4 pounds, averaging 1 to 2 pounds. A pink-red beefsteak, slightly flattened, with the kind of presence that makes you want to photograph it before you eat it. What the story doesn't include is the reality of growing it. Mortgage lifter needs heavy, consistent feeding to support those enormous fruits. It needs serious staking, the kind of infrastructure most gardeners set up in spring and immediately regret as undersized by August. It matures in 80 to 85 days, which is a long time to carry a plant that also happens to be susceptible to early blight and fusarium wilt. And here's the betrayal that lands hardest. Even when everything goes right, the fruit sizing is inconsistent on the same plant. You'll get one enormous, gorgeous specimen alongside a cluster of fruits half the size, making it impossible to plan your harvest or your kitchen around. Blossom end rot shows up uninvited. The legend is bigger than the yield. If you want a large fruited heirloom that earns its space, research varieties with more reliable production and comparable flavor. If you won't give mortgage lifter up, and I understand that impulse, feed it heavily, stake it aggressively from transplant, and never let the soil moisture swing. Have you grown mortgage lifter? Tell me in the comments, did the harvest match the legend for you, or did the plant exhaust you before the fruits delivered? San Marzano, the most prestigious paste tomato name in the world. Developed in the San Marzano sul Sarno region near Naples in the late 1800s, the true heirloom produces elongated paste fruits, 3 to 4 inches long, deep red when ripe. Gardeners plant this because they want to make authentic Italian sauce from their own garden. That's a beautiful motivation. It's also how the prestige trap closes. The true heirloom San Marzano carries no resistance to verticillium wilt, fusarium wilt, or nematodes. None. In a garden with any soil-borne disease history, and most established gardens have exactly that, these plants frequently collapse mid-season despite everything you do to prevent it. The prestige was built in a specific Mediterranean climate, in specific Italian soils. Most home gardens cannot replicate those conditions, and the plant receives no disease resistance backup to survive outside them. There's a second trap specific to San Marzano that catches even experienced gardeners. True heirloom seed is genuinely difficult to source and authenticate. Many products labeled San Marzano in mainstream retail are modern hybrids, a completely different plant with different disease resistance, different growth habit, even different ripening patterns. The true heirloom is indeterminate, which is unusual for a paste type. You're harvesting constantly rather than processing a single abundant yield, which defeats much of the point. If you want San Marzano flavor for your sauce, the honest answer is a disease-resistant San Marzano hybrid. Look for one with VFN resistance on the packet. It won't carry the heirloom cachet, but it will still be standing in August. What comes next is a variety I guarantee most of you have grown, and the cracking problem lands differently from yellow pear, because this one involves a color that hides everything from you until it's already too late. Black Krim, a heirloom from the Crimean Peninsula, introduced to wider cultivation in the 1990s. The fruit runs 8 to 12 ounces, deep mahogany brown to black purple with distinctive green shoulders, ripening somewhere between 75 and 80 days. It is genuinely beautiful. That beauty is also what gets you. Black Krim cracks, severely, specifically at the stem end, in radial patterns during ripening. Thin skin, high susceptibility to moisture fluctuation. All of that is true, and it's well documented. But what makes the Black Krim cracking story different from other cracking varieties is the color. You're standing in front of a fruit that's already deep, dark mahogany. How do you know when it's ripe? You keep watching it, waiting for a signal that it's time. And because the color is so dark, so uniform, you wait a little longer than you should. By the time you're confident it's ready, the splitting has often already begun near the stem. The characteristic that makes this tomato so visually distinctive is the exact same characteristic that makes it hardest to harvest correctly. The two problems are not separate. They feed each other. Ripeness confusion leads to fruit left on the vine. Fruit on the vine in uncertain weather cracks. The beautiful color that attracted you to the plant becomes the obstacle to harvesting it well. Here's what actually helps. Stop reading the color and start reading the feel. Black Krim should yield to gentle pressure. That softness, not the color, is your signal. Harvest slightly earlier than you think you need to, and let it finish on a warm kitchen counter. And if you want a dark-fruited tomato with better skin integrity, there are options worth researching that carry more forgiving skin thickness. If this kind of counterintuitive growing detail is what you come here for, subscribing means you won't miss it, because there's more of this coming. Cherokee Purple, a Cherokee Nation heirloom from Tennessee, traced to Native American origins before 1890, and popularized through seed-saving networks in the 1990s. The fruit runs 8 to 12 ounces, averaging 10 to 12 ounces, dusky rose purple to brownish purple with darker shoulders. A beefsteak with genuine flavor complexity when conditions allow you to taste it. Notice that qualifier. When conditions allow. Cherokee Purple has a maturity range that is itself a small warning sign. 72 to 90 days, with most sources citing 80 to 85. An 18-day range on a single variety is significant. You don't know if you're getting a 72-day plant or a 90-day plant until you're already deep into the season. And then, after you've staked it, fed it, protected it, waited through what might be 3 full months, the cracking hits right at the moment you've been working toward. The thin skin splits in radial and concentric patterns as the fruit approaches full ripeness, near the stem end, worsening with the exact conditions that late summer brings. Inconsistent rainfall, humidity swings, the kind of unpredictable moisture that the last stretch of the growing season always delivers. This is not a spring disappointment. It is not an early season problem you shrug off and forget. This is the betrayal that comes after months of investment. It comes at the precise moment your excitement is highest. I have walked out to a plant heavy with Cherokee Purple at what should have been harvest day and found splitting across fruits I had genuinely been anticipating. It is a specific kind of loss. To reduce cracking, keep moisture as consistent as possible in the final weeks. Drip irrigation matters enormously here. Harvest as soon as you see color changing on the shoulders, slightly before full ripeness, and let them finish inside. And if you want that complex, dark-fruited flavor with more skin integrity, look for dark-fruited heirloom options specifically noted for less susceptibility to splitting. Have you grown Cherokee Purple and watched it crack at the worst possible moment? Tell me in the comments, because I know I'm not the only one. Now, Sun Gold. Developed in Japan by Tokita Seed Company, introduced to gardeners in the early 1990s. Tangerine orange cherry tomatoes, 15 to 20 grams, born in clusters of 10 to 20 fruits, maturing in 57 to 65 days. The flavor is genuinely exceptional. I'm not taking that back. Sun Gold belongs on a short list of the best-tasting cherry tomatoes you can grow. Every seasoned gardener I know recommends it without hesitation. That is exactly what I said. Past tense. Year 1. Spectacular. The clusters come in waves. The flavor is that perfect balance of sweetness and acidity. Everyone who tastes one asks which variety it is. You tell them, enthusiastically. Year 2. You walk out in spring and your garden has made a decision without you. Sun Gold fruits drop under the mulch. They bury themselves. They germinate. There are documented cases of a single plant producing 500 volunteers the following season. 500. I have given tomato plants to neighbors until my neighbors started taking the long way around my house to avoid me. But here's the part that makes it worse. Those volunteers are an F1 hybrid gone feral. They segregate genetically, producing orange, red, pink, and yellow fruits that lack the flavor that made you love the original. The exceptional taste you grew it for doesn't come back in the volunteers. You've planted a factory, and the factory is now running without you. Manage this deliberately. Harvest every fruit before it drops, daily during peak season, without exception. If you want a cherry tomato with comparable sweetness but less chaos, look for crack-resistant cherry varieties with similar flavor profiles. The flavor is real. The garden takeover is also real. What's coming next is the one I mentioned at the very beginning of this video. I need you to hear this one fully. This is the one. 3 seasons. Never once made it to harvest. Not once. Brandywine. The Amish heirloom from Pennsylvania, traced to 1885. Pink-red beefsteak fruits averaging 12 to 24 ounces. Oblate shape, slight ribbing. The flavor reputation is real. I am not here to tell you Brandywine doesn't taste extraordinary. In the right conditions, with a harvest in hand, it is one of the finest tomatoes you will ever eat. That reputation is not fabricated. It is what makes this regret so complete. Brandywine has no meaningful resistance to late blight or early blight. None. In a humid growing season, the kind that most of us navigate every year, with August rain and heavy air and the conditions that have characterized the last several summers, the plant collapses. Not gracefully, not slowly, in a way that gives you time to save what started ripening. It collapses mid-season, before those fruits that needed 85 to 100 days to mature have had the chance to finish. I watched it happen the first year and told myself I'd chosen a bad season. I watched it happen the second year and told myself I needed better preventative spraying. I watched it happen the third year and stood very still in my garden for a long time. The maturity window is itself part of the trap. 85 to 100 days is a long time for a plant to be exposed to disease pressure it has no resistance to. Every additional day is another day it must survive conditions it was never equipped to handle. And the yields, when disease does allow survival, are modest compared to modern varieties. The risk-to-reward calculation is brutal. Here's what I will tell you honestly, as someone who still hasn't fully given this one up. Brandywine succeeds in cool night, moderate humidity conditions, zones 5 to 8, in years when late summer stays dry. If that describes your garden in a normal year, it's worth trying under a strict preventative copper spray program, started early and maintained without breaks. If you live somewhere with humid summers, high heat, or disease pressure in your soil history, the failure is not a matter of effort. It's a matter of genetics. The variety has no tools to fight what your garden will throw at it. For the flavor goal without the grief, look for a disease-resistant variety specifically bred for complex heirloom-style flavor. They exist, and they don't require you to watch months of work disintegrate in a wet August. So here we are at the end of a long list of regrets, and I want to leave you with something more useful than a list of varieties to avoid. The loop is closed. Now move forward with this. Not one of these tomatoes is simply bad. What every single one of them has in common is incomplete information. A catalog description that told you what the variety does well and stayed quiet about what it does poorly. Every disappointment on this list was preventable, not by avoiding great varieties, but by asking 3 questions before you buy anything. First, what is the disease resistance profile of this variety? Specifically, which wilts and blights it resists, and which ones it doesn't. If the packet doesn't say, find out before you plant. Second, what does this variety look like in its 3rd season, not its 1st? Year 1 enthusiasm is in every catalog. What happens to this plant when your soil has history? When your summers are unpredictable? When you've grown it long enough for its real failure modes to emerge? Third, what do experienced growers in your specific climate say about this variety? Not what the catalog says? The person in your region who's grown it for 5 years knows something the seed company won't tell you. If you make a habit of those 3 questions at every garden center and every seed catalog, your list of regrets gets shorter. Not because the varieties improve, because you stop walking into the trap with your eyes closed. If this list saved you even 1 failed season, subscribe. Because this kind of honest, specific information is what this channel delivers every time. The most expensive seed you'll ever buy is the one you grow for a full season before you understand why it doesn't belong in your garden. The most valuable thing you can take from someone else's failure is the year you don't have to spend learning it yourself.